I'm an average man.
And I am an average woman.
One thing about being the average man, leading the primitive life, it gives you plenty of time for thinking. My wife thinks a lot.
It's true. Although we're living 10,000 years ago, I do think a lot, but then so does he. Though being average, he only thinks average thoughts. In fact, we're both so average, sometimes we think the same average thoughts, so we don't even bother to speak to each other.
You know, I could tell you precisely what she's thinking now. She's thinking, what would it be like to move forward 10,000 years in time and live in the 21st century? Oh, what's that?
It's a time machine.
Oh, crikey.
Oh.
Look at that.
Hey. Hello?
What's that?
Hey, look. What are those? Those things he's holding? They look like square bits of...
I don't know. It's all so complicated.
Oh,
What's that?
I don't know. Hey, they seem to be doing things for each other all the time.
And everybody seems to be depending on those little pieces of...
Oh, no, look. They were round bits, those.
Was she going to eat that? Oh, hey, they look just like us.
Oh, except they're wearing those funny clothes. I wonder if they think like us.
I bet they do. He's thinking, how did we get into this amazing state of affairs? Wouldn't it be lovely to have lived 10,000 years ago, before life got so complicated?
Yeah, and she's thinking, what was it like 10,000 years ago when there were no banks, no factories or offices, no post offices or mobiles or computers, no shops or supermarkets? In fact, what would it be like to be us?
I bet they got it all wrong. I bet they think it must have been paradise 10,000 years ago with nothing to do all day long, except enjoy themselves.
That's right. They think we spend all day getting a nice suntan, feasting on the bounty of nature. When he wants something to eat, all he has to say
Is lunch ready?
"Ooh, coming, dear."
I bet he thinks he's completely independent of everybody else.
Yeah, and that he's his own master. Oh dear, they've got a lot to learn.
I suppose they'd imagine a community of folk, like us, living 10,000 years ago, in a wooded valley cut off from the rest of the world by high mountains.
The folk in Happy Valley, they call us.
Just the life, really. Enough work for everybody who wants it. No inflation. Whoever heard of inflation when there's no money?
Yeah. And no problems of one person having more than the other. Everybody here is absolutely equal because everybody is in the same boat.
Yeah, and in the same conga line. Woohoo!
Oh, yes, life is so wonderful here, isn't it? So easy and playful and happy.
And that's how they think it was, if only they knew the reality. For a start, there's no machinery here to help us grow food. Everything is done by the painful sweat of the brow of you-know-who.
And you know who. Have you ever tried rubbing away at poor soil baked like concrete by the sun? Come on, get on with it.
Oh, you get on with it.
Poor kids, they're flaked out.
Get on with it, I said. You want to eat, don't you? The back-breaking jobs you have to do just to keep alive. And you'll have to be doing them over and over again, year in, year out, till your dying day.
And then one day some people think, there must be a better way of life than this.
There will be those who say, but we've always lived like this. My father and his father before him lived like this.
Well, that's no reason for going on the same way forever and ever.
Sometimes there doesn't seem to be much choice.
Until you think about it.
The fact is, life can be rough and it can be short. Suppose somebody's taken ill.
Well, there's certainly no nurse or doctor just around the corner. When somebody gets sick...
They die. The average age a man can expect to live to is only about 30.
Many children die very young.
The truth is, Happy Valley is threatened in lots of ways.
Get up, quick!
Oh, go back to sleep.
Get up, get up, get up! I know I heard something, I did. There's something outside.
Go back to sleep.
Oh.
You're always imagining
Oh.
things. Oh, it's a wolf!
I told you!
It's a wolf! Oh. And that's how it is. When wild animals raid the valley's livestock, it's a major disaster.
The animals can't be replaced overnight. Where would they get them from? There are no markets, remember?
And then winter comes, and everybody has to live on grain or the few root vegetables they've managed to save from the summer harvest, if they're lucky.
And that's all there is to last until spring.
Don't worry. It's bound to be a mild winter. I can feel it in my bones.
In a bad year, there's no surplus to put by. They have to rely on what's dug out of the frozen earth, if anything.
And if you're really unlucky, that can mean starvation.
A mild winter, you said?
Don't worry. It won't last. You'll see. But somehow or other, people did survive. After all, we couldn't be here talking about them if they hadn't, could we?
Well, that's true. And we had everything. Snow, floods, wild animals. Yet we survived. Still, there was one thing we didn't have much of.
What's that?
Choice. For instance, they can't choose one job in preference to another. They just do whatever's necessary to stay alive. And they do it hour in, hour out, day in, day out, week in, week out.
This way of living is called a subsistence economy. It needs all the efforts of every able-bodied member of the community just to stay the way they are now.
And there's nothing to spare for anyone else. Anything they don't need for themselves today, they keep for themselves tomorrow. And all this isn't just a piece of history or a bit of imagination. It all happened thousands of years ago. It's true. And it's still happening today. For real.
You know, about a quarter of all the people in the world today live on less than $1 a day. They produce barely enough for their basic daily needs, and sometimes not even that.
In a poor country like this, for instance, approximately 95% of all adults work on the land. They're very poor and their lives are very hard. Of course, there are always those at the top who do very nicely, even in a country like this, but most are constantly threatened by disease and famine. People like this are essentially living like their ancestors.
They're on the very bottom of the economic ladder. They're one step above extinction. 95% of the population of many developing countries work to produce food just for themselves, and that leaves hardly anybody else to produce other goods and services.
In Britain, only about 1% of the people work in agriculture, but more than half the food we eat is produced on our own farms.
In the US, just 2% of the population are farmers or farm workers, and they produce enough to feed the remaining 98% of the American population, with enough left over to export vast quantities to the rest of the world.
An American farmer producing 1,000 tonnes of wheat a year will only need a few £100 of this for his family. What he does, in effect, is to swap the wheat he doesn't need for cars and trucks and tractors and new fencing and all the other things he wants for his farm and everyday life. The goods, in fact, produced by the vast majority of Americans who aren't required to work on the land.
Just consider these two ways of life, and the astonishing fact that they can both exist at one and the same time on our small planet.
How can this possibly have come about? Why has this happened in some countries and not in others, even though they may have the same climates and conditions?
How can people at a subsistence level ever lift themselves off the bottom rung of the ladder? What's the secret?
The secret is producing more than you need for your own immediate use. The point at which a community can create a surplus is the point at which it can begin its long march towards a wealthier life.
It's also the beginning of the science of economics. they say our way of life was called?
As if it matters what it's called. Still, if you must know, it's called a subsistence economy.
Subsistence economy. It's terrible. I work day in, day out just to keep us alive.
It's not just him. Every human being here is just a machine.
You fill them up with food and water, and then you use the energy you get from food and water to dig the ground, to plant seeds, to grow grain, and to keep the animals.
Then you eat the food you've grown to give yourself energy, to keep yourself alive, to plant more seeds, to grow more food.
To give yourself more energy, to plant more seeds.
To grow more food, to give yourself more energy. It's a trap, you know. The subsistence trap.
It needs a genius to get us out of this one.
Come on, kids, run for it!
Oh, it's horrible.
Oh, that landslide, it's huge.
And it's blocked off the whole of the valley.
Now we'll never be able to get our cattle and sheep to the only grazing they've got.
They'll die, and we'll starve. If we could only get across the river.
Oh, just look at that lovely green grass. Enough to make any cow's mouth water.
But we'll never get the animals across that river safely.
Unless we build a bridge.
But I only have enough energy to plant the seeds, to grow the food, to give me the energy
Oh, we'll
to...
never build that bridge. What we need is a genius.
Wait. I have an idea.
Uh-oh, he's got an idea.
Everybody round here is like us. They have 1 cow, 2 or 3 sheep, a few hens, and a patch of ground for corn. They catch their own fish, collect fuel for cooking, build their own houses for themselves to live in, and they make their own clothes for themselves to wear.
Though some are better at some things than others.
Precisely. For example, you make the best clothes in the village.
He can be quite flattering when he feels like it.
Though I suppose it's only because I'm so good at getting good wool from our sheep.
The truth of the matter is that the man with the real knack with sheep is our next-door neighbour, Mr. Shepherd, not you at all.
Oh, well, that's true. I must be best at something, though.
Thinking, love. You're very good at thinking.
Hey, that gives me an idea. Listen, suppose we alter the system. There are 10 families in our village, as it is now. Every household has their own cow and their 1 sheep. They keep poultry, catch their own fish, grow their own corn, and collect their own fuel.
And they do their own cooking. And they make their own clothes.
Right. So in order not to waste time walking to the woods to collect fuel, or waste energy by 1 man looking after 1 cow, why doesn't each family specialise?
What? Divide the labour?
Precisely. Division of labour. That's what it's all about.
So only one family looks after the sheep?
Mr. and Mrs. Shepherd. They really got away with sheep.
And another family sees to the cows?
The cowards. They're marvellous.
Yeah. Another does the fishing?
Mr. and Mrs. Fisher.
And others do the farming, collect the fuel and do the cooking?
And we make the clothes for the whole of the village.
The tailors.
Right.
Oh, but that leaves 2 families over. The masons and the carpenters.
Because 8 of the families in the village specialise, they produce enough for 10.
And that leaves the other 2 to build a bridge across the river to the new pasture.
Brilliant!
Yes!
Let's put it to the others and see if they agree. Besides, think of what will happen if we don't do something soon.
Yeah, if we don't, our animals will have nowhere to graze.
And we'll all go hungry.
Well, that's settled then.
Yep. To you, Charlie.
It worked!
Who would have thought it?
Not only are Mr. and Mrs. Farmer getting bigger crops than any of us managed on our own, the fishers are bringing in more fish, and the shepherds are keeping all our sheep much better.
Not to mention the fact that the whole village is better clothed now that the tailors are in charge.
But what about the masons and the carpenters? They're well fed and well dressed just like the rest of us, but now that the bridge is finished, there's really nothing for them to do.
I've got an idea.
Oh, she's got an idea.
Mrs. Farmer over there, she spends most of her time carrying water from the river to water her crops. Well, if the carpenters and the masons could just be persuaded to dig a channel to take the water from the river to the field...
Not only would it keep the crops watered, it would save the farmers energy, and they could use that for growing even more food for the rest of us.
Brilliant!
And that's how it was.
When every family did everything itself, everybody was working flat out from dawn till dusk just to stay alive.
But now we've hit on division of labour.
And we've all become specialists. And we've all become more skilled at our speciality. And as a result, we have a surplus.
And that surplus is the mason and carpenter families, or rather the product of their labour.
They've opened up bigger, richer pastures for all our cattle and sheep. And they've given us a regular supply of water, and that means better crops of vegetables and grain.
And all this is one of the most important things ever to have happened in the community. The surplus created by dividing the labour. It's the first step on the path to prosperity, and it's a tremendous step.
Division of labour by product is at the heart of all progress and prosperity, and it's not hard to see why. Well, just think about the sort of food we eat every day. Cheese from a huge factory in Holland. Salads from specialist farms on the Channel Islands. And that ham is from one of the great Danish pig farms.
More than 120,000 pigs a month leave Denmark as pork and ham and bacon and sausages to shops of the world.
The bread comes all the way to your table from a great wheat field on a Canadian prairie. The tea comes from northern India, where the villagers make a living by exporting to the rest of the world.
By cultivating thousands of acres, they produce tea at a price you can afford.
That's another bonus of specialisation, a bonus of division of labour by product. Goods become cheaper.
But of course, it doesn't just happen in agriculture. Everything on this table is mass-produced by specialists. Plates, knives, forks, table mats, the lot.
And that leads to another step in specialisation.
Good, isn't it? Remember what it used to be like?
What, subsistence economy? Oh, I'd rather forget it. Working day in and day out, digging, planting seeds to grow the food so that we could eat it to give us energy, so that we could go on and do more digging.
And plant more seeds, to grow more food, to eat, to give us more energy, and so on.
And so on.
And so on.
Ah, but we thought of a way out of that.
I'll say, a bit of brain power. That's all we needed. Instead of each family supporting itself by doing everything, we divided up the labour so that each family specialised in what they did best.
And that way, the shepherd family got even more wool from sheep because they got better at raising sheep. The farmer family grew even more wheat, and the fisher family brought in even bigger catches of salmon.
It's happened with all the families.
And all that extra skill they learnt, and all that time they saved from travelling about from place to place, and all the boring preparatory work they no longer had to do for all the different jobs, meant that 8 families produced enough for 10. We had a surplus.
And that surplus provided for the needs of the 2 other families, the masons and the carpenters. And they built a bridge so we could feed our animals on better pasture.
Then they made an irrigation system that watered the land and gave us even better crops.
I suppose you could say the road to a bit of modest prosperity began with that one idea of mine.
Yes, I suppose you would.
Well, it's scarcely a life of luxury we live, but at least we have enough to know that we and the children won't starve, and we can even lay a bit by for tomorrow.
And have a little bit of time for ourselves and the family to do other things.
Like making that shawl.
Like making this shawl.
That's a nice shawl there.
He says nice things sometimes.
But the trouble is...
Sometimes he doesn't.
It's taken weeks to make. Weeks.
It's true, it did take weeks. Well, 2 weeks anyway.
Shearing the sheep, washing the wool, spinning it, dyeing the thread, weaving it into cloth, finishing it off.
So
it's a lot of effort to put into a shawl. It'll be worn out after a couple of years. It's nice, though.
that's what I call a wholehearted appreciation.
Hey, what's going on over there, then?
Ooh. What?
He says he's from a village up the river.
Just look at all that wonderful stuff he's got in that boat.
Ooh.
Cooking pots to die for.
Oh, yes. Apples. Oh, wonderful red apples. Oh, I wish we had apples like that. Oh.
And shoes for the children.
Aye. And axes. And knives.
Well, what's he going to do with all that stuff? Eh? What?
He says he's a trader.
What's a trader?
He says a trader is somebody who exchanges whatever surplus goods he's got for whatever surplus goods you've got.
It's true we don't live in a subsistence economy anymore. We don't have much to spare. We've got a bit of spare food, but it isn't as good as the food he's got. Our apples aren't half as nice as his. Hey, what's he doing? Hey, if he thinks he can trade me in exchange for all that stuff, he's got another thing coming. Tell him.
He says your shawl is cool.
Oh, he likes my shawl, and so he should. Took me weeks to make.
He says he needs 20 shawls.
20?
He'll give the whole boatload of stuff for 20.
20?
They're for the King of Wongaland. He's got 20 wives.
What?
If he only gives one of them a shawl like that, the others get so jealous his life simply isn't worth living. Do we have another 19 like that?
Do we have another 19 like that? That took me weeks to make. Well, 2 weeks anyway.
Oh, he said he'll be back in 2 weeks.
I've never seen cooking pots like that before.
Aye, and those apples look delicious.
We could have done with a new pair of shoes for the kids.
He said he'd give us everything in that boat for 20 shawls.
Oh, look, there are 10 of us here with a bit of time to spare. But even if we all worked flat out, we'd only make 10 shawls in 2 weeks.
We need a genius to produce another 10 shawls. A genius. Or a miracle.
Hey, I've got an idea.
Uh-oh.
Why does it take so long to make a shawl? I'll tell you why. Because there are so many processes you have to go through before you can turn what's on a sheep's back into something that you can wear. Well, first, you've got to catch your sheep. Then you've got to shear it. You've got to fetch water to wash the wool. And then you've got to spin the wool into yarn. And there are dyes to make before you can colour your yarn. Then you've got to weave your yarn into cloth, and even that isn't the end. Putting on knots and tassels that give a finishing touch takes ages.
Every one of those processes takes ages. You can see why. Setting things up, putting things away again. And even if you're good at weaving, it doesn't mean that you're good at dyeing or spinning.
And that's where my idea comes in. There are 10 of us here. Suppose we each did only the thing we were best at. One will do the shearing, enough wool for 20 shawls. Another would wash it, all of it. 3 would spin it into yarn, and 1 would dye the yarn. Well, that would leave 2 to weave it and 2 to do the finishing off.
That means you wouldn't waste time setting things up and putting them away again.
Right.
And there's something else that could happen too. It needs a genius to see it. Since they're only doing the things they're best at, everybody will get better with practice.
Genius. Anyway, why don't we give it a try?
Why don't we?
Well, at first it looked like we'd never do it in time.
Obviously, the dyers and weavers couldn't start until the dye was ready and the wool was spun, so they helped shear the sheep.
It wasn't long before we all got very good at our jobs. Well, we might not have been ready on time if the shearers and the spinners, who finished their jobs quickly, hadn't helped the weavers and the finishers who were getting behind.
But we did what we set out to do.
And in exchange, we got what we wanted.
Oh, lovely.
Nice pots.
Oh, champion.
There you are. And this is how we did it.
We divided the work into separate processes, so that each one of the 10 of us specialised in just one thing. The result was we doubled our productivity. We produced 20 shawls in 2 weeks.
Before, using the old ways, we would have produced only 10. We'd created the extra ones by division of labour by process.
But this time we used the surplus in a different way. We swapped it for somebody else's surplus.
And the result is, we've now got a lot of things we couldn't have made for ourselves.
What we discovered was the division of labour by process. It's created more surplus.
And by trading that surplus, we've taken another step along the path to prosperity. Oh, the cooking I can do with this.
Oh, just look at that. There are still quite a few places in the world today where division of labour by process is still at much the same point as in our village community. Some people spin, some people weave, some people finish off the goods. In the modern industrial world, it all looks very different, and so it is in a way, but if you follow manufacturing through, you'll see that it's still divided by process in just the same way, even if it is on a massive scale.
The shearing and cleaning of wool is carried out on huge commercial sheep farms. The raw wool is spun into thread on enormous machines with 200 spindles that turn out 23 miles of yarn a minute.
The yarn is woven on gigantic electrically powered looms that produce almost an acre of cloth a day. It's dyed in special machines and then made into goods like these, which are sent off to the docks for export.
And in return, we get other people's surplus. Beautiful fruit, tea and coffee, things we cannot produce ourselves. We don't swap it directly the way our villagers did. We sell our products and use the money to buy the tea, but it comes to the same thing.
And it's made possible only because we've created a trading surplus, and created it through division of labour by process, one of the foundation stones of the modern industrial world. Why am I sitting here?
Why? I don't know. To keep warm, I suppose.
No.
So you could daydream and carve on a piece of wood?
No. I mean, how am I sitting here?
How? You're squatting on a stone. You have been ever since you came back from collecting the firewood.
No. You're really not trying to understand me. I mean, how come I've got time to spare to sit here at all? It wasn't so long ago that we had to work from dawn to dusk just to keep ourselves alive. In those days, there was never any question of idling the odd half hour away in front of the fire.
Like now? Ah, you've been thinking again.
That's right. I've been thinking. I've been thinking that once upon a time we lived in a subsistence economy. Then we could never have spared the time to do nothing in particular. Now we can spare a bit of time. Why?
Well, that's not difficult. Just think back for a few minutes.
Right. I'm thinking.
Well, we got out of the subsistence trap by creating a surplus.
That's right. And we got that surplus by inventing division of labour.
Right. First, we divided the labour by product. We changed from each family doing a bit of everything to one family specialising in only one thing. Say sheep, or fishing, and so on.
Then we invented another kind of division of labour. Instead of one person making a shawl for themselves, we divided the process between the families. Shearing and spinning, dyeing and weaving. We all made twice as many shawls as we were able to before.
Yes, we made a surplus.
And we traded our surplus for somebody else's surplus.
And now we're all better fed.
The children are healthier.
And we even managed to put something by for a rainy day.
And
Yeah?
it's your turn to fetch the firewood.
I wouldn't mind if he did something useful while I do that hard stuff, but all he does is make toys for the children. Hoops indeed. Oh, 6 trips to the forest that lot took me. His turn now. And what use has a hoop ever been to anybody?
Hoops. Come on, kids. Hoops. 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 Ho-ho-ho! Hoops. Woohoo! Hoops. Hoops. Hey, hey, hoops. Look at this. Wheels.
My pile took me 6 trips to the forest.
And mine took 1.
Yes. I'll show him. Yes!
Well, I'll be blowed. Another revolutionary idea. It's all very well for you. All you have to do to earn your keep is turn grass into milk. How would you like to push a plough? Hey, look at me when I'm talking to you. Well, how would you like to push a plough? Or even pull a plough? Hey, kids, over here! Good girl. Walk on, walk on.
Oh, you've got to hand it to him. First, he invents the wheel. Then, he gets the animals to do the work for him. What next? Hey, what about the really important jobs? Like grinding the corn that makes the bread that gives him the energy to make more toys for the children. Yeah, what next indeed?
Uh-oh, I think she's thinking again.
Yet another machine.
And yet more surplus.
In fact, we only had one reason to invent anything. We wanted to cut down the effort we needed to do a job. Then we'd have more energy to spare to make more surplus.
More time, too.
Hey! Then we could even take time off. Have a holiday.
That's why we invented machines. After all, they're nothing more than devices which make the energy from our muscles more effective, therefore more productive. Every machine, no matter how complicated it looks, is made up from very basic parts. For example, a wheel and axle, a lever, bits of wood, put together with one purpose in mind, and that purpose is to reduce the amount of human muscle needed to do any particular job. The next step was to eliminate it altogether by using animal muscle.
One horse or one ox has the strength of 20 men. It can do 20 times more work and create 20 times more surplus. But it's possible in the end to do away with muscle power altogether, animal or human.
And that's by harnessing the forces of nature. Water power can grind corn.
It can also power spindles and looms.
But there are more powerful and more useful sources of energy in nature.
The wind.
Coal.
Oil.
Uranium.
It isn't all that long since we were using simple machines combined with animal power to produce surpluses.
Even today, in some parts of the world, animal muscle is still the main source of surplus. There are places where animals are still used for freight or carrying passengers and for machine power.
Until the railways in the 1830s, a horse was still the fastest means of travel on the land, just as it had been for tens of thousands of years. But in time, the way the machines were applied became more complicated. But no matter how sophisticated they got, there was still only a combination of very simple machines.
The wheels and axles on this modern tractor enable it to tackle ground farmers would once never have dreamed could produce any crops. And the gears that make it possible to go up and down steep slopes are operated by levers.
Basic machines combined together make it possible for us to turn nature's energy into huge surpluses. But it's only possible to produce surpluses like these when you can draw the energy you need from one of nature's great resources.
Until the end of the 19th century, wind powered the fastest method of travel over water. But there was something much more effective than either wind or water, and that was the power of fire.
Fire transformed the world. First, it boiled water for steam engines. Then, it ignited petrol in combustion engines and generated power for steam turbines.
And more recently, the controlled energy from nuclear reactors has been converted to electrical energy. And what does it add up to, all this application of different forms of energy?
It adds up to a surplus. The creation of the surplus means that the time saved by the wheel on a cart or the lever on an engine can be used to make more goods.
You can either use these goods or you can exchange them. Or you could use them to provide services. Nurses, or teachers, or postmen, or firemen. Or you could use them to provide leisure for yourself.
So when we take advantage of a combination of mechanical devices, natural resources, and our own efforts, we create a surplus, and that surplus provides us with the standard of living we have today in our modern world.
You know, I've been thinking.
Oh, yes. And what have you been thinking?
Well, I've been thinking that it's thinking that got us where we are today.
Well, I followed your first bit about you having been thinking again, but I got lost on the second bit of thinking.
Well, just look at our village today.
Yeah, so I'm looking.
What can you see?
Well, I can see a group of people who aren't exactly living off the fat of the land, but they are doing very nicely, thank you.
Right. And how did this happen when, not all that long ago, we lived in a subsistence economy?
Oh, now I see what you mean. You mean which pieces of thinking, which ideas took us from one level of prosperity to another?
Right.
Right. It's quite simple, really. Subsistence is the economy we started out with, and a surplus is what we've got now.
Yes.
And the way we got from one to the other was by specialisation and by mechanisation. Sometimes a bit of one, sometimes a bit of the other, and sometimes a bit of both.
Do you remember what it was like, living in a subsistence economy?
Oh, could I ever forget?
We used to spend all our time and energy just getting ourselves enough food to stay alive. And there was never anything left over. And then we discovered division of labour by product.
Oh, yes, what a day that was.
It certainly was. We divided labour by product, which just meant that instead of every family doing everything for itself, one family specialised in sheep, one in cattle,
Another specialised in fish.
another in tailoring and cloth making.
Oh, that was us.
Yes, and as a result, 8 families produced enough to feed 10, which left 2 families with nothing to do. So they built the bridge, which took our cattle across to new pastures. And then they had time to dig the irrigation channel, which took the water to more of our crops. Do you remember what happened then?
Yes, then came division of labour by process. Until then, to make anything, one person had always done everything. I used to do everything from shearing the sheep to weaving the cloth, one process after another. It was slow, and I wasn't very good at all of it.
So we decided to specialise in one process each.
One did all the shearing.
Another, the washing.
Yeah, another the spinning.
And another did the dyeing.
Another the weaving.
Another for finishing.
And the result was that the same amount of people produced twice as many shawls by working together, one process each, as they would have done making complete shawls by themselves.
And what's more, the shawls were much better made.
Oh, thank you very much. Anyway, that's how we left our subsistence economy behind, to produce our surplus. It was our first great idea. We specialised. We specialised by product and we specialised by process. And our second great idea was... we mechanised.
We had ideas for new devices and we had ideas to harness horses and oxen. In our family's case, our greatest idea for mechanisation and our most useful device was the wheel.
Oh, yeah, you can say that again. The wheel meant that the children could bring home in one go what would previously have taken you and me 6 journeys. Do you remember that day when you thought of saving your own strength by letting the animals do the work for you?
Oh, yes. What a great day that was.
Yeah.
Animal muscle power. But it was nothing compared to what's happened since we discovered how to harness the forces of nature.
Yeah, there was the energy of wind.
And the energy of water.
And eventually, there was the energy of coal.
And the energy of oil.
And linking these sources of energy to our mechanical devices meant that we could till soil, draw water, grind corn, and produce all kinds of things far more quickly than simply by using our own muscles.
Mechanisation was the second step out of the subsistence economy. We mechanised by inventing devices and by using natural forces to add to our own efforts, and it was specialisation and mechanisation that gave us our surplus.
But what is the surplus? What is it that specialisation and mechanisation gave us?
First, we now have stores of food that'll last us through the winter. We have a few luxuries to tide us over until the harvest.
Second, we have surplus food and manufactured goods that we can exchange for other things we want when the trader brings them.
Third, we've built a bridge and a barn and a water wheel. We dug irrigation channels. We've made spinning wheels and ploughs, and they help us protect or even increase our prosperity.
Fourth, we can spare 1 or 2 people from the fields to serve the rest. Part of the surplus food can go to somebody who teaches the children and somebody who looks after the sick.
And fifth, we have a bit of time to spare. We can play games occasionally, paint beautiful pictures on our crockery, or make beautiful clay figures. Or decorate our huts. So we applied our surplus to 5 different things. Reserves, in this case food. Trade. Capital. Services. And leisure.
All this may not seem much if you don't remember how they started out in a subsistence economy.
I'll never forget it. Days of cold, sickness, hunger, days of back-breaking toil.
It all seems a long way away now.
Yes, we have come a long way.
Yeah. Of course, I don't really have to tell you that our community is imaginary. A valley like ours never really existed.
Not exactly, anyway, but everything we've seen, everything we've talked about, really happened through the ages, in some community or another. Let's take a look at reality for a minute.
This is how men once tried to set down their own reality. These are the actual pictures drawn by primitive men, showing their own lives as hunters and wanderers.
And for all but a few thousand of his 1 or 2 million years on this planet, this is how man really lived. Hand to mouth, day to day, and place to place. He followed the herds, eating any wild animals he could kill, gathering whatever wild fruit and vegetables he could manage to find.
But for most people, life began to change dramatically about 10,000 years ago, when human beings found the secret of staying in one place.
The secret was farming, domesticating animals, pigs and cattle, sheep and goats, and cultivating crops. By finding that secret, man had stumbled on the path to prosperity.
The first prosperous civilizations grew up in 4 great river valleys: the Yellow River in northeastern China, the Indus in Pakistan, the Tigris and Euphrates in modern Iraq and ancient Babylon, and the Nile in Egypt.
And yet, if you look at those great fertile valleys today, you'll find a strange thing. They're now among the poorest of the world's nations, often unable to provide even enough food for their inhabitants.
Until 200 or 300 years ago, the richest countries were often the ones with the best land. But today, great industrial communities have been built up in the world, using resources imported from other places. In other words, some of their wealth comes from foreign trade.
There'll always be a strong disagreement about why some countries have followed the path to prosperity and others haven't.
But of one thing there is little doubt. Those who have achieved it have done so by creating a surplus. A big surplus, using exactly the same method as we did in our community. This factory, like all factories, is the result of division of labour by product. And the product is television sets.
It produces them in a whole lot of different stages, division of labour by process.
It's mechanised, and the production is achieved through devices like wheels, levers, gears, hinges and pulleys. Most of the energy comes from electricity, supplied by harnessing the resources of nature, like water, coal, oil and uranium.
As a result, 1,000 people working in a factory like this turn out 500,000 sets a year. 500 a year each. Since they don't need them all for themselves, they've created a massive surplus of television sets to exchange.
So in effect, they'll be swapped for other people's surpluses. For his share of the exchange, a worker in a factory gets food, clothing, heating, a house and a car from other workers who produced more of those things than they needed.
He also gets roads, street lighting, a teacher for his children, a doctor and a policeman as well.
And after all that, he still has his evenings free to watch a television.
Oh, of course, he still has his problems and frustrations.
But when you consider the subsistence level where it all started long ago, is there any doubt about which sort of life you would prefer? You know, I can't believe it sometimes.
Didn't come easy. Took a lot of hard work.
It certainly did.
The idea of each family in a community producing something different, dividing up the labour, mechanising, that's what made the difference.
We make really wonderful clothes now.
Oh, yeah.
We've got a right to be proud.
And the farmers produce terrific wheat and barley.
The cowards are turning out the best beef and cream I've ever tasted.
Pity about the shepherds.
I'm getting a bit fed up with the shepherds.
Though you've got to admit their mutton is better than anything we could produce, dear.
When we manage to get any of it.
Anyway, don't forget the fishers. That trout of theirs yesterday. Oh. And our idea of putting everything we all produce into common stores so that every family can take what it needs works really well. Well, up to a point, anyway.
We'd have had salmon yesterday if the shepherds hadn't got to the barn first. We had to have the fishers' trout instead. Still, it was better than anything we could have caught.
Better food isn't the only advantage, you know.
That's true enough. There's more food for everybody now. After all, when you spend all your time at your one job, you become more skilled at it.
Our looms are the most efficient this valley has ever seen.
We get 10 times the amount of cloth from this beauty, and it doesn't take any more effort either. You've got to admire the fishers, though.
Yes, that boat they made to get down the stream to fish in the lake. Brilliant idea.
And they spent all those evenings making a huge trawling net. Beautifully designed floats and everything.
They must have increased their catch 20 times over with that net.
The masons increased their productivity in just the same way.
So have the farmers and the shepherds.
I know all about the shepherds, thank you very much.
You do go on about the shepherds, dear.
Yeah, and with reason. There they are, look at it again.
Not again.
This week, all they've put in the barn is one mangy lamb. And what have they taken out of the common food, you may ask?
It does look a bit suspect.
Would you believe it? And they've got 3 times as many sheep as the cowards have got cattle.
Oh.
Mrs. Coward knows what they're up to. They're cheating and salting away all her beef for a rainy day.
Mind you, Mrs. Coward doesn't have much right to complain. She walked off with all the best raspberries last week.
We've got to face facts, you know. This idea of a common pool hasn't worked out as well as you thought it would.
Yes, and we're not the only ones who think so. This business of sharing doesn't work. It's not fair. By the time our family gets to the barn, the best stuff is gone. The share out is far from equal.
And it's not only that. Look what's happening now. Just because there's a glut of vegetables that nobody wants, we have to throw away all those turnips. After all that work, too.
And don't forget that terrible row over the raspberries. Disgraceful behaviour. After that, Mr. Mason thought we should put him in charge of everything.
Oh, that man makes me so mad. Ooh, look at him showing off.
He said because he was the strongest person in the valley, he'd guarantee to make sure that everybody would put everything into the barn. He said he would personally divide it all up and issue everybody with their own share.
Yeah, I'll bet he would.
Anyway, we all knew what that would mean, having your head knocked in by Mr. Mason.
Well, you had a bright idea.
No, I had an inspiration. I suddenly had the notion of nobody putting any produce into the barn at all, and everybody keeping everything they made for themselves.
Mrs. Fisher immediately said that'd mean they'd eat nothing but fish for the rest of their lives. And Mr. Carpenter asked you if you expected him to eat hammers and nails for his supper.
Yes, he did, as a matter of fact. And Mrs. Farmer said, where was she supposed to get new clothes when the old ones wore out?
Well, it did seem a reasonable question in the circumstances.
But it was. I mean, it is. Don't you see? We can't possibly wear all the clothes we make, but we do need corn and milk, and we do need fruit and fish, and we do need all the other things everybody else makes and grows.
So?
So, we'd swap.
An inspiration!
That's what they all said. Mr. Fisher immediately noticed that if the shepherds didn't produce enough sheep, they wouldn't have anything to exchange.
And Mrs. Carpenter said, right, no mutton from the shepherds, and they don't get the fences from me for their lambing pens.
And if the shepherds didn't like the new plan, they could lump it and leave.
It would just mean more grazing for the cattle. We'd have just as much meat as before, but it would be beef instead of mutton.
It's a way of making the shepherds behave, without having to put Mr. Mason in charge of everything. Everybody was delighted. Although he's not that bright sometimes, even Mr. Mason began to see how he would benefit.
That's how we all agreed to have a swapping day, every week in the square in front of the big barn.
Remember that first day? The fishers brought an enormous load of beautiful fresh salmon. Beautiful it was. Everybody swapped their cloth, their milk, their fruit, and even a stool from Mr. Carpenter for the fish.
Swapping worked so well, we began to do it every day. For things like raspberries and milk and fish that don't last but we want every day. There was no end of what we could swap if somebody else wanted it.
Even Mr. Mason promised to build a jetty for the fishers if they would supply him with 1 salmon a week for the whole year.
Yes, everybody thought it was a wonderful system, except the shepherds. They'd brought practically nothing to swap.
When anyone made a bargain, it would be marked on the wall for everyone to see. That's why we called our square the market place. It became the busiest place in the village. In fact, it became the village centre.
Oh dear, the shepherds had a pretty thin time that first day, especially as the fishers had brought along masses of salmon, which made up for the shortage of mutton. That night, the shepherds went home practically empty-handed. But the next week was a different story. The shepherds came back with an enormous supply of sheep. Mrs. Shepherd said that last week, she'd lost her sheep and didn't know where to find them till this week. And if you believe that, you'll believe anything.
Well, as time went by, the market became the best family outing of the week. Not only did everyone discover the value of their produce for everyone else that day, they saw all their work rewarded.
They discovered other things too. They found out what was happening in the village. They found out what people needed so that they knew what to provide next time.
Of course, the word market didn't really originate from the mark on the wall of the barn. And the world we're living in these days is very different to the kind of life you saw in our village. But from time to time, people do try to live without markets. The famous example is the kibbutz in Israel. Here, everyone works for the community. But the most successful depend on growing or producing things which are then exported and sold in the markets of the world to provide money for the kibbutz's common pool. In return for their work, people get food and shelter, but few of the kibbutz are really self-sufficient.
In the 1960s, many groups of hippies tried to make new lives for themselves by getting together to grow their own food, make their own clothes, and even build their own villages. Their idea was to share everything equally, but not many of their communities flourished. Some people found life too hard. There were personality clashes and people walked out. Others needed doctors or medicines, and when there weren't any, they left too. But hippie communes that survived tended to specialise in crafts, leatherwork, gem work and jewellery. But to sell their work and to buy what they needed to live, they had to take their wares outside to the market. Like the people in a kibbutz, they quickly realised the undeniable advantages of a market to the survival of their chosen way of life.
Markets just spring up spontaneously. Look at car boot sales. Nobody launched them, they just happened. Now tens of thousands of people go there every week.
And when the internet arrived, it became a worldwide market in cyberspace.
There are markets for everything. Big things, small things, even markets in ideas like leisure and holidays. Perhaps the commonest, everywhere in the world, are the markets for the food we eat. They are important meeting places too. People may go to buy and sell, but they don't miss the chance to catch up on the local news and discuss local issues. But along with all the swapping, there is an information system at work. Information about what there is to sell and what there is to buy. Information about what is scarce and what is plentiful. Information about what's not worth much and what is considered valuable.
Markets that flourish do so because they work. If they didn't, they'd soon go out of business. Because voluntary transactions that don't work tend not to be repeated. People are like that, regardless of the control and politics of the societies in which they live. They come away from the market immediately satisfied with what they've acquired and what they've learnt. And that's the nature of every market in the world.
It worked very well at first.
What did?
The market.
Bit too well, if you ask me.
Right, I will ask you. What do you mean the market worked too well?
Well, look what happened to the fishers.
What did happen with the fishers?
You remember their catches?
Oh, of course I do. They catch salmon one night, perch the next, all lovely and fresh. 2 lots of wonderful fish on offer on their stall at the same time.
True. And what did they exchange their salmon for?
They did very well out of that. For each load of salmon they were guaranteed to get a dozen eggs, 12 bags of corn and a leg of lamb.
Yeah, and what did they get for each load of perch?
Well, they didn't do as well from that, did they? Maybe only half a dozen eggs, 3 bags of corn and a couple of chops if they were lucky.
Yeah, but they'd spent the same amount of time fishing for the salmon as they had for the perch, right?
True, but most people prefer salmon to perch any day, and you can understand why. It was the same with the turnips and the carrots.
Oh, Mrs. Farmer, you mean?
Yeah.
She soon found that Mrs. Shepherd would only give her a leg of lamb for turnips.
But for a load of carrots, she could get a leg of lamb, a couple of chops, and a skein of wool. What's more, Mrs. Farmer didn't have to work any harder to grow carrots rather than turnips.
It's weird, isn't it?
Not really. Mrs. Shepherd just happens to be partial to carrots, that's all. It's another example of a market giving people information. It tells you what people want, and it tells you what people don't want.
Same thing happened with those shawls I used to take to market. People seemed to get tired of the old favourite designs. Then, as soon as I started to take some of our jazzy new designs, they went like hotcakes, even though I was asking twice as much in exchange for them.
Variety. That's what people want, and that's what the market gave them. Choice.
And that's where the trouble began. The more choice people had, the more complicated the market became.
Complicated? I'll say it was complicated. Do you remember the time when we needed a dozen eggs?
Oh, yes, do I not. It seemed the simplest thing in the world, didn't it? We'd just made a lovely new red cloak.
Nothing seemed simpler than to take it along to Mrs. Farmer's stall in the market and swap it for her eggs.
I know. But Mrs. Farmer didn't want our nice new cloak that day. "No, thank you very much," she said. "I don't need a new cloak. What I want in exchange for my dozen eggs is something for our supper, like a nice fat salmon."
Well, the fishers have a nice fat salmon, so we go along to the fishers with our lovely red cloak. "Very nice indeed," says Mr. Fisher, "but what I actually want is butter."
But of course, it's the cowards who have butter. And do they want our red cloak in exchange for it?
Not on your life. What they need is a beautiful kitchen stool. And who makes stools?
Mr. Carpenter.
Ah.
And does he want our beautiful red cloak in exchange for it?
Of course he doesn't want our beautiful red... He does? He does? He really does want our beautiful red cloak in exchange for his rotten old stool. Quick, quick!
So, by swapping our cloak for the stool for the butter for the salmon, and the salmon for the eggs, we got what we wanted in the first place.
What a hassle for just a few eggs. Whoop, whoop. Oh, more hassle.
Oh, I know. I'm worn out. Oh, sometimes you spend most of the day just finding out who wants what. It's such a waste of
time and energy, which we ought to be spending on making the clothes we need to exchange for food.
There must be a better system.
There must.
Yeah, but what? You remember last winter when everybody was short of corn? Well, if you had corn, you could swap it for anything. You never had to go round and round from one person to another, collecting things you didn't want, to swap for other things you didn't want, till finally you got the things you did want. You just swapped everything for corn. You could even keep it till next week or next month if nobody had what you wanted that market day.
That's all very well. You didn't have to lug those things to market and back when you couldn't swap them. And when harvest time came, you could hardly give the stuff away.
Hey, but wait a minute. But suppose this is something someone always wanted. Suppose there's something we could use like we used corn last winter. Something like water, for example. What?
But they've got as much as they want of it. And if they haven't, all they've got to do is drop a bucket into the river. It's theirs for the taking.
Strawberries?
They go bad after a couple of days.
So, it's got to be something everybody wants and nobody ever has enough of. It mustn't be too heavy and it mustn't ever go bad.
There ain't no such thing, my dear.
Yes, there is.
What?
These!
The coloured stones I sometimes find by the river.
Yes! Everybody wants them for rings and bracelets and necklaces, and there aren't too many around.
What a great idea. Why don't we... Hold on. I've thought of a snag.
What?
Suppose one of these is worth a dozen eggs.
Well, then you simply swap it for a dozen eggs.
But suppose you only want half a dozen eggs.
Oh, I see what you mean. Can't break it into smaller pieces. I've got it. That's it.
What?
Gold. We could use gold. Nobody ever has enough of it. You could swap a very small amount of it for an awful lot of meat or eggs or cloth. It keeps forever, it doesn't even rust, and you can divide it up really small.
Brilliant! Absolutely brilliant!
So, that's what we persuaded everybody who used the market to try out. Every family got all the gold it could spare and took it round to Mr. Smith. Then he melted it down and made it into small round pieces for them. Some were bigger than others, and some were small enough to carry in your pocket or your purse. See?
Ooh, shiny, aren't they? Then, of course, shopping in the marketplace became so much simpler. If you couldn't do a straight exchange, say a new shirt for Mr. Coward's butter, because Mr. Coward didn't need a new shirt, you could give him some of your gold in exchange tokens for the butter instead, and he would use them to buy the salmon he did want.
And the nice thing was that in the end, the person who did want your shirt would arrive with the exchange tokens, swap them for the shirt, and you'd be back where you started with the same number of exchange tokens you started with. And with the butter you wanted instead of the eggs you didn't want.
In history, all sorts of objects have been used for money and still are. Iron rings, shells, even tobacco. Though precious metals have been the most popular because they can be easily divided into smaller pieces. and because they don't corrode or rust.
Eventually, less precious metals such as copper and bronze were to take the place of gold and silver.
However, there used to be a problem because any metal could be debased by mixing it with a cheaper metal. To stop that, they used to test the purity of the metal and then stamp it with a special mark, an animal or the head of a king or queen, to authenticate it.
Also, people used to clip small pieces off the edges of their coins.
To stop that, they specially milled the edges to make it obvious if somebody cheated. The system in a similar form can be seen today.
These days, printed paper money has mostly replaced coins as a medium of exchange. Today, everybody uses money without having to think about either its origins or what it consists of. But the important point to understand about it is that of itself, it has no special value. Its value lies only in what you can do with it. Money itself is simply a mechanism for making it easy to exchange things. Like the people are doing in this market now.
But of course, money has other advantages. It's very hard to swap, say, a pound of strawberries for a pound of peaches, for instance, because strawberries are finished by June and peaches don't ripen until August. But if you sell the strawberries, the money will store their value until August, when you can buy your peaches.
And money is also a useful measure of worth. If everything has a money price, you can compare the values of a piece of land, a flock of geese, or 6 months' hard work by a carpenter, which otherwise are very hard to compare. It's funny to think that although money itself might be worth almost nothing, it happens to be one of mankind's most powerful as well as most fascinating inventions.
Best steak again?
Best steak again. I mean, what else?
I know. Who'd have thought it?
Who would have thought what?
Well, all that time ago, who'd have thought that we'd be doing well enough today to eat steaks?
Or to be able to count the profits.
Exactly. Do you remember the day things were so bad we began to think we might take a break from making clothes to sell in the market and turn to something else? They were hard times. There was no steak in those days. Best end of bone, if we were lucky. All right, dear, off we go then.
Right. Oh, it's true. I remember it just like it was yesterday. I had a feeling it was a dreadful mistake to give up on the weaving business, even if it was only for a short time.
Well, nobody was buying your shawls. Things looked black. It was either starve or change.
So we changed. Oh, it had been a dreadfully hard day in the woods that day, looking for mushrooms and plums.
Well, that's why I gave you the mushrooms to pick. Mushrooms are lighter than plums.
Yeah, but there were 10 times more mushrooms than plums.
Odd that, wasn't it?
Uneven, I'd call it.
But what a time I had in the market that day. Who would have thought a few plums would cause all that trouble? Get your lovely plums. Here they are, they're lovely. Oh, well done. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Thank you. Well done. Lovely. Oh, hey, hold on. How was I to know that everybody was sick and tired of the glut of apples and that mine were the only plums on the market? Ow!
Oh, get off him, you bully!
It wasn't as though I was overcharging. Ow! Mine were exactly the same price as Mr. and Mrs. Farmer used to charge when they had lots of plums. Oh.
You could have heard a pin drop at my end of the stall, it was so quiet. Everybody seems sick to death of mushrooms. You'd have thought they had a bad smell the way people kept away from them. But they were lovely mushrooms.
Trouble was, they were just like everybody else's mushrooms. The shepherds, the masons, the cowards, and the farmers. Particularly the farmers.
Yeah, trust their luck to turn up with the year's first tomato crop when everybody's fed up to their teeth with mushrooms. Oh, dear.
What a day.
Oh, I know. You know what? I wouldn't have cared if I'd never ever seen another plate of mushrooms. Oh, no!
They were all rotten by the next day anyway, so we ended up throwing them all away. At least that was one advantage.
No, disadvantage is what I called it. Something else could have been stored for a rainy day, but not mushrooms.
No, not mushrooms.
Oh. And then I suddenly had another thought. Why don't we use things the other way round? Why don't we only spend an hour or so collecting mushrooms and the rest of the time collecting masses and masses of plums? That'd please our customers.
And make us a fortune. What a brilliant idea! It really made sense. Mushrooms were getting harder to find anyhow, and the plum crop was getting better and better.
So that's exactly what we did. But it's funny how things don't turn out how you expect.
There we are. I remember that day. Calling out, "Get your lovely juicy plums. Roll up then, roll up. Here they are now. Fruit to tingle your taste buds. Roll up and please, form an orderly queue. Roll up. Plums all fat and juicy. Everyone a winner. Come on, 10 cents a bowl, all fresh picked with my own fair hands this morning. Straight from the..."
Hello. Oh, all right, one at a time, please. Sorry, can you just be patient? Oh, it wasn't what I'd call one of the most successful of days. Even though it was a slack time, I'm sure we could have earned more money on either day by weaving cloth and selling clothes. Just as last time we had a load of mushrooms we didn't know what to do with, this time we had a mass of overripe plums.
Too true. Rich man, poor man, beggar man, bankrupt. You know, I remember thinking that. The first time, people would have paid 3 times as much for my plums.
Yeah, and I remember thinking I'd have sold all my mushrooms if only I'd been charging half the price.
Right. And at half the price, I'd have sold all my plums the next day.
And the next day, I could have sold all my mushrooms at 3 times the price. Oh well, we said, that's life.
And then we suddenly had a thought. Why should it be for life?
We'd always done things in the same old way.
But why should we always charge 10 cents a bowl?
It's true, we always had. Everybody always had.
Why couldn't we change it?
We couldn't.
We could. There was no law against it. This is what we said to ourselves. Look, how much did we make on the first day?
Well, 10 bowls of plums at 10 cents, that's 100 cents. 10 bowls of mushrooms, another 100 cents. So, 200 cents altogether.
And how much could we have got by adjusting the prices? Let's see, I could have got 30 cents a bowl. That's 300 cents.
And if only I'd cut the mushrooms down to 5 cents, I'd have sold the lot.
And you had 60 bowls worth.
That's right. Hey, that makes 300 cents.
Right. So just by changing the prices, we could have made 600 cents instead of 200 cents.
Yeah, and today we could have done just the same. We took 200 cents today, but we could have got 300 cents for 10 bowls of mushrooms at 30 cents and 300 cents for 60 bowls of plums at 5 cents.
So we said to one another, why don't we try it?
After all, we said, they can't kill us for trying.
And so we did. Next time we managed to find lots of ripe apples, but we also found the season's first peaches, so we charged 30 cents for the peaches and 5 cents for the apples. When they saw what we were doing, people were surprised. At first they were a bit angry at the high prices of the peaches, so I told them they didn't have to buy if they didn't want to. But some people who'd had a very good week could afford it. Others wanted them so much they were prepared to do with less of something else, and between them they bought up all the peaches despite the price. There we go. They're lovely.
And at my end of the stall, people were really pleased to find such good, cheap apples. It's true, the farmers were selling nice apples too, but at 10 cents a bowl. 5 cents is a very different matter. They didn't buy all of them, mind, so I offered the last lot at 2 bowls for 5 cents. 2.5 cents a bowl is a bargain some people couldn't refuse. See?
And there we were, at the end of the day. There'd been no fights or scrambles for peaches, no apples left to rot, and instead of the 200 cents we'd probably have made if we'd not adjusted the prices, we got nearly 600 cents to show for our troubles.
It's an unavoidable fact of life that goods have to be allocated somehow, and we'd discovered for ourselves that the price of goods can prevent fights or long queues on the one hand and huge surpluses on the other. Am I right or am I right? And it all goes towards demonstrating a general principle that applies to marketing anywhere. It makes no difference whether it's fish, or furniture, kettles, or computers, boots, or books. Nothing has an absolute price or an absolute value. Take any commodity you care to mention, no matter how ordinary. Its value always depends on the circumstances.
Take water, for example. In a country near the equator, it can be very expensive because it's difficult to come by. And in the middle of the desert, near an oil well, in a country like this, a barrel of water can cost more than a barrel of oil. This chap's selling water, and he's doing very well. But in these same places, dates can be so common, have so little value, that scarcely anybody bothers to pick them.
On the other hand, there are some countries where dates are rare and expensive delicacies. Yet in these same places, water might cost next to nothing because it's so easy to come by.
However, water is as essential to life here as it is anywhere on Earth. If you live on the edge of a lake, you might have thousands of times more than you need, so its price isn't high. Just because something is high in demand doesn't automatically mean it's expensive. The balancing point is price. It regulates on the one hand supply and on the other hand demand.
The fascinating thing is that if you go to any market or any shop, every price you see on every single thing that's for sale has a story to tell. It tells you, for example, how plentiful or how scarce something is in relation to the number of people who are not only able to buy it, but are willing to buy it.
Comparing prices can tell you a great deal about different things with similar characteristics. An avocado can weigh the same and may even have the same nutritional value as a potato, but the different price of each can tell you how much more difficult one was to produce than the other, or how far it had to travel and how much people want it.
Changing prices makes another interesting story. The way the price of cherries and of salmon changes between early May and late June can tell you a great deal about when cherries grow best, or about how easy it is to catch salmon, or when the season is open or closed.
But what price tells you about something has nothing to do with its absolute value. Price can only tell you about value relative to a particular place at a particular time. It's the relationship between supply and demand.
It's like a pair of scales. The price pointer is in the middle. If demand is on the right and supply on the left. When demand is great and supply is small, the pointer will move to a higher price. But when supply increases and demand decreases, the pointer moves to a lower price. And this tells us the first simple but important law of demand.
The higher the price, the smaller the quantity that will be demanded.
Or, if you prefer,
the lower the price, the greater the quantity that will be demanded.
It's a law that applies to this and every other market you can think of.
Lovely plums, lovely juicy plums. Get your lovely juicy plums. Roll up then, roll up.
We learnt a lot from the market. In particular, we learned how the price of what we had to sell affected the behaviour of the people we were trying to sell to, the consumers. We'd found that raising the price reduced the amount people wanted to buy. It acted as a sort of rationing system.
Yeah, and on the other hand, we'd also found something else. Lowering the price of an item increased the amount people wanted to buy. It acted as an incentive. But the truth is, it isn't only the consumer whose behaviour changes as the price goes up and down. The producer's behaviour changes too. And our behaviour certainly changed. Phew. All right, come and get it. Come and get it. Oh, forget it.
It all began that day. I'd been out with the children. We'd walked further into the hills than I've ever been in my life before. And just guess what we found?
It really wasn't the time for guessing games.
A cave!
A cave?
Hmm.
Who wanted to talk about caves when the meal they'd been cooking all morning was stone cold? And the shawls they'd been making all week had to be got ready for the trader.
I asked you if you knew what it was made of. Well?
Who cared what a rotten old cave was made of if you knew that unless we sold the shawls to the trader, we'd have no money left for food, hot or cold?
It was made of salt, dear.
Oh, what was?
The cave made of salt, I explained, that we could sell salt on the market. I felt sure that we'd do very nicely from it.
Oh, who could possibly be so stupid? We already had enough salt to last us for a month. The trader brings sacks full every time he comes. It only costs 10 cents a bowl. We couldn't possibly compete with his prices. Oh, you see, we'd starve unless we could think of something better than that. It was much better to make clothes and blankets. That way we got a decent amount of money for a decent day's work. You've got to admit I'm right.
Yes, but all the same, I thought it was worth a try. After all, soon everybody would be wanting to salt down meat and fish for the winter. So I took my salt to the market the next day. But nobody took any notice of my salt. They said it was crazy to try and sell it at that price. I should have known, of course. My wife was quite right. She usually is.
Yes, and since one of us had to earn some money, I took the shawls to the trader. And although we couldn't sell our salt at our asking price, people needed it badly. There was a crowd waiting to buy it from the trader so they could preserve their fish and meat for the winter. But do you know what? There was a shock in store for everybody. The trader didn't have any salt, and he told us why.
His village salt mine had caved in. It had been terrible. The whole tunnel was blocked. They didn't even have any salt for themselves, let alone enough for trading. Now, if we only knew where we could get some.
Yes. If we only knew where.
If we only knew where.
I wonder... Just a minute.
Where's she off to?
Look. Excuse me. Excuse me. Look.
Oh, that's good stuff.
Yes. Oh.
Here you are.
Oh, yes. Oh, that's lovely.
Well, we got the message soon enough.
You see, the whole of the village needed salt badly.
No salt for the fish and meat surplus would mean that by next spring there'd be nothing left to eat.
It was a long hike to the cave and hard work when we got there.
But it was wonderfully clean, high-quality salt.
Yeah. But the question was, would we be able to sell it at a price high enough to make all that effort worthwhile?
And the answer was... could we not? Ho, ho, ho! Here they come!
Yes, even at that price we could have sold 10 times as much.
So, naturally, we decided to get a whole load more of it. The trouble was, of course, we weren't the only people to realise that if you were onto salt, you were onto a good thing. We had company.
Ooh, that awful shepherd family had caught on.
Oh.
They were all there, digging away at our salt.
But even at 40 cents a bowl, salt was still well worth selling.
But the trouble was, everybody else realised it.
It soon began to look as though our whole village had turned to salt mining.
Yet the surprising thing was that the price of salt still made it worth our while to go through the trouble of fetching it from the caves.
And another interesting thing was that now we'd stopped weaving, there were fewer shawls about, and their price had got higher and higher. Things continued like that for a few days. Then the market seemed to have settled down.
Prices didn't go up much.
And they didn't go down much.
The price of salt stayed at 15 cents a bowl.
Stayed at 15 cents, that is, until our salt bubble burst.
Yes, it was that trader again.
They'd re-excavated their salt mine, and what's more, they'd found a rich new seam. Now he was offering it cheaper than ever.
You what? 5 cents a bowl?
And there's plenty more where that came from.
Oh, so there was only one thing left for us to do.
Reduce the price yet again. Again, salted fish.
Yes, salted fish again.
Who wants to struggle 5 miles to a salt cave to dig for salt which scarcely brings in enough money to keep the children fed?
But was there any alternative?
Was there any alternative?
And there it was! The price of shawls had made it worthwhile thinking about starting weaving again. So I sat down at my loom and I began to work hard. Oh, I'd forgotten how much I enjoyed this. What happened on that occasion was this. When the supply of salt ran short, the prices rose, and that encouraged more and more people to produce it. This increased the supply, and as more and more salt appeared on the market, its price dropped, but soon it reached a stable level.
Then, when the supply rose yet again, the salt miners found that it wasn't worth the effort, and they stopped mining and went back to their previous job because it brought in more money than mining.
I'll soon have this one finished. We saw in the last programme how the market was full of messages for the customer about the present state of supply. These are scarce here today, but those are plentiful. These are expensive and difficult to produce and distribute, but those are cheap and easy. And we saw how high prices ration scarce goods, while low prices clear plentiful goods.
But the marketplace is simultaneously sending messages back to the producer about the present state of demand. A busy stall tells the producer people want more of these than they can get. On the other hand, a slack period in the market tells him people don't want these very much, with the result that high prices stimulate increased production and low prices cause reduced production.
So, price is always acting to encourage producers to produce the right balance of what customers want to consume and to keep adjusting to every change in supply and every change in demand. It happens everywhere. Behind every price in a store, there is a volume of information, experience, calculation and judgment. The manufacturer has worked out his production costs, estimated how many he could sell at various prices, and picked the price that gives him the biggest profit.
But he's competing with all the other manufacturers. And if his sales volume starts to drop, the message will get back to him fast. If it's a big change, it may mean a big rethink and a big change in the price.
It might even put him out of business. A lot of manufacturers of hand-wound watches had to do a big rethink when electronic watches came onto the market at a fraction of the price.
But it also works the other way. In the 1970s, during the UK bread strike, bread prices shot up. But people still wanted to buy bread. This stimulated others to hire trucks and import loaves from Holland. At the normal price, transport costs were too high to make bread importing worth anyone's while. But when scarcity doubled the price, it was a very different story.
In the same way, the quadrupling of world oil prices in 1974 made other kinds of energy production more attractive to producers. Offshore oil, coal, nuclear power, wind power, they all had been rated too expensive, but that only meant compared with oil. So when oil prices shot up, it became worth people's while to pay the extra production and distribution costs because they could now charge prices they never could have charged when oil was cheap.
The high oil price did what high prices always do, discouraged and rationed the consumer, but encouraged and stimulated the producer.
What happens is this. When the price is high, people are encouraged to produce a lot.
But after the first rush, you won't get many customers because the high price puts them off. You'll have a lot of unsold goods. As the price drops, fewer people think it's worth producing, but more people think it's worth buying, and so it goes on.
About here, you reach a point of balance. A price which stimulates the production of just about the amount that customers will buy at that price. If the price goes on downwards, more and more producers will be discouraged. But at each falling price stage, more and more people will want the goods.
That's when you get fights, queues, and black markets. This price, the one in the middle, is called the equilibrium price, the price most goods settle down at.
So, just as we saw in the last programme that there's a law of demand, there's an equally important law of supply. It's this.
The higher the price offered, the greater the quantity supplied.
Or if you prefer, the lower the price offered, the smaller the quantity supplied.
And, like the law of demand, the law of supply applies to this and every other market you can think of. Do you remember that day we set out on our great journey?
Oh, I certainly do. And all because somebody started a rumour that there was a hidden village where people made a kind of cloth entirely different from the sort we make.
We discovered that it was more than a rumour. There really was a hidden community, and it was quite unlike ours.
Hello there.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello?
Can we come down?
We had a surprise, I can tell you. They were strange.
I hope they're going to be friendly.
I do too. Look, they're coming our way.
Just stand and smile.
Hello.
Hello.
We brought these to say hello.
And I've got one too. There we go.
To greet you. A lot of you have come to to greet... Oh, for me!
Oh, that's nice.
Oh, isn't that lovely?
Oh, I get one too.
Oh,
Oh, look at me. I look
look
like
at you with flowers around your neck.
Lovely.
Funny old thing. Oh, oh dear. Oh. Oh.
But they were wonderfully friendly.
Would you believe it? They didn't use any wool at all to make their cloth. They used this fibre. It grew on plants. Cotton, they called it.
The amazing thing was that their cloth-making machinery was very like ours.
It's true they didn't have such an efficient foot treadle on their spinning machine, but the turn shuttle on their weaving machine was twice as fast as ours was. It's amazing.
Look at that.
Yeah.
And the finished cloth. Well, that's really something.
Yeah. So we had an idea. We decided to offer to buy some of their cottonseed.
But would you believe it? They didn't understand what money was. They'd never even heard of it.
No, so I asked them how they managed without money on market days.
And the funny thing was, they didn't even know what a market was. Would you credit it?
Yeah. They didn't seem to want to have anything to do with our money, did they?
Not at all. I checked to make sure that they didn't all produce small amounts of different things inefficiently, like we did in the bad old days.
Oh, remember that?
Oh, crikey. They agreed that they did specialise. Some produced cotton, others produced pots, wheat, others sheep, and so on. It's more efficient that way, they said.
But the big question was, how did they share everything out?
They explained.
It starts with a council of elders. They decide how much of everything the village is going to need next year. How much beef, how much cotton, how much fish, and so on. Then they produce a plan for the whole village, saying how much of what product each family has to produce each year. When the produce is ready, it all goes into the village store.
Ah, we said, people like your Fisher family must be honest as anything. But some people cheat, you know, like those awful shepherds in our village.
Oh, they're shocking, they are.
Horrible lot.
Yeah, can't trust them for a minute. Ah, no, they told us. The guardians see there is no cheating. They allocate so much of each product to each family. The ration they're given is the basis of the original plan.
But, we said, supposing you don't grow what you're told to, or don't like what you're given.
Well, they said, you can apply to the elders for a change next time. And in any case, most people have their own private patch where they grow things they specially like. And if they exceed the production quota, they can keep some to swap with other families.
And that does make a certain amount of sense, you know.
Yeah, it does.
But we explained to them that that was the way we once ran the whole village, and that now we have an even better system, and we don't have to do what we're told.
How? They asked.
Come and see, we said.
So they did. And this is our village.
And that's Mr. Mason.
Oh yes, hello.
And the shepherds are over there. We explained how everybody grows what they like and brings it here to the market. We used to swap our goods, but that became too complicated. We solved that problem with money. It's the price of the goods that keeps the balance between supply and demand. Nobody tells anybody what they have to produce or what they have to consume. Simple, you see?
Yes, but they weren't fools, our new friends. They could see problems.
Is it possible, they said, for one person to pay another to do a job?
Yes, we said.
Well, in that case, they said, the employer must tell the employee what to produce. That's right, isn't it? And you've got to admit, it's a fair point.
And who, they asked, took the decision to build the road?
And who is responsible for building this bridge to the meadow? And who's going to build that watchtower we've been talking about?
And what happens when there's a wheat blight or a fowl pest and one family has nothing to take to market?
We explained that we sorted some of these things out at the village meeting. Everybody who turns up has a right to a say. We eventually come to an agreement how much everybody will chip in to pay for things like that.
Ah, but supposing you don't agree, they asked.
Well, we just do. We have to.
You have to, they said. In that case, it's just like our Council of Elders plan. You contribute what they decide and they distribute it how they choose.
The truth is, we both work the same way. Both of us have some voluntary exchanges and both have some planning and allocation. The only difference is we do things in different proportions.
What we've seen is an imaginary illustration of the two principal economic systems. This village is an example of a market economy, a system based on voluntary exchanges with a price mechanism taking care of many allocation problems. But even the best markets can't take care of everything. And we saw how hardship and public amenities were taken care of by central direction and compulsory contribution. And that will take care of the tower.
Now, the cotton growers' village was the opposite, the planned economy, based on central direction and control. But even there, planning couldn't take care of everything. And a simple voluntary exchange system had grown up side by side with the planned economy.
Here you are.
Oh, look at that. That's a prize winner.
Oh, thank you very much.
It's the same in the modern world. The old Soviet Russia was one of the most extreme examples of the planned economy. The government set a 5-year plan and every industry had quotas and targets. The farms were collective farms producing for the state to a plan laid down by the state. And everybody had a job allocated to them. But even in Soviet Russia, people were allowed to produce their own food when they'd met their state quota, and there were free markets where they could sell it.
Equally, most people would point to the United States as a prime example of the free market. But the US takes billions of dollars in compulsory taxes from the citizens to provide them with centrally planned and controlled services. Roads, police, schools, health, public housing. Curiously, a lot of these are also provided by the market. Commercial security guards, turnpike roads, private schools, private hospitals, private homes. They exist side by side.
The truth is that although the market economy and planned economy are two opposite solutions to the problem of allocating scarce goods and services, there is nowhere in the world where you will find either in its full state. Every economy is a mixed economy. What makes systems so different is the balance each one strikes between central control and market forces.